Hey everybody, Steve Browski. Welcome to tip number 53 in the series 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam. As a reminder, my website, code3firetraining.com, is a free stuff link with lots of great free information on there. Check it out. And this series is based on my latest book from Fire Engineering Books and Videos, 101 Tips to Ace Your Promotional Exam, available off their website as well as mine. All right, tip number 53. In the last tip, 52, we talked about knowing your fire department inside and out. In the previous tips before that, we talked about knowing yourself inside and out. Now we want to talk about knowing your community inside and out, because again, you should know your department, your organization, but also knowing your community, I think, is critical to your success. So what are some things to know? Basic demographics, population, breakdown by gender, ethnicity, and so forth, square miles, challenges. I mentioned a term in tip number 52, SWOT or SWOC, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or challenges. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or challenges, SWOT or SWOC, SWOT or SWOC. Here's another way to use that term, getting to know your jurisdiction better. You know, demographics. I touched on one of the previous tips about knowing your key leaders, appointed officials or elected officials. I say appointed officials, usually like your city manager or the city administrator, parks and recreation director, public works director, police chief, not just fire department officials, command staff, but also command staff of the key city departments. The more people you can know on your city staff or county staff, the better you're going to be, because you're going to have to interact with them at some point, maybe on a day-to-day basis, running calls, or maybe whatever. Maybe if you're involved with managing programs or budgets or projects, you may have to cross-pollinate and get to know those folks, because you're going to need their help at some point. So it's the more people you can know, the better. And also not just the elected officials, but the informal leaders, you know, personnel at all ranks. The more you can know, the better. You know, and more about your city, knowing some key documents, like I touched on in tip number 52, knowing your department's budget, strategic plan, anything related to your department. Now, regarding this tip about your community, your city, whoever your jurisdiction is, in most departments, it's city fire department. You know, you work for Oakland Fire, you work for the city of Oakland. So know your jurisdiction budget, and not just the fire department budget. Remember, tip 53 deals with the community. So know the fire department budget, but also know the city's budget in a whole. Know what fire takes up. If you look at most budgets, police and fire make up usually 2/3, if not 3/4 of the entire budget. So I know it's great to get raises and increase our benefits, but police and fire were usually the most expensive service. I mean, I think we're also the most valuable services that a community can, you know, pay and justify, but we come at a cost. So understand that it's a ripple effect. So know your jurisdiction budget. Now, there's another term that you may not be familiar with. And you're going, Steve, I don't give a shit about budgets, finances, money. As long as I got money coming in, I'm good. Well, besides the budget for your community, because some budgets are annual budgets, sometimes it's every other year budgets get approved by the elected officials. There's another term that's very common that you need to be familiar with: Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or CAFR, CAFR for short. Now, like in my fire department, we're required by law to produce, not just have a budget that's approved that we live within the means of, but also understand the CAFR. If there is a CAFR that's produced because of your state or whatever federal requirements, whatever you fall under, you know, the CAFR it's a boring document. I mean, I know ours was like a couple hundred pages. Like, it's painful to read, but it gives you the financial health and wellness of the organization, of the community, because everyone always thinks that money grows on trees. It doesn't. You know, it's amazing where sometimes people go, you know, Chief, we need to replace, you know, whatever, I'll use things, the ventilation prop. The ventilation prop just broke, fell apart, and we need to buy a new one. What do they cost? Well, I don't know. I'm just throwing a number out there because I'm having a brain fart right now. Well, they're only $10,000 or $5,000. Just take it out of the budget. Well, here's the thing. If we did not, a year ago, or whenever the budget was first submitted for approval, just because I put in my budget request that I want to upgrade the ventilation prop, say at $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever amount of money it is, first of all, just because I want it doesn't mean it's approved. A lot of times budgets are deferred, meaning, well, because of the lack of money coming in, because of lack of sales tax due to all the businesses shut down because of the COVID pandemic, guess what? We've had to really be selective on our budgets, because budgets can get approved midstream. Budget's usually 1 year or maybe 2 years. But to modify a budget, whether to increase it or potentially decrease it, which both can happen depending on the funds or the lack thereof, it usually has to go through your elected officials as well too. But the key is understanding the health and wellness. Now, if I was someone that was going for, say, a fire chief position at another department, or a deputy chief, or a high up command position, even as a firefighter position, I'd be looking at that community's budget. How well or not so well are they supporting their fire department, and also the CAFR, because a lot of departments, because personnel, I mean, think about it, in most budgets, personnel costs are 90% of the budget is just wages and benefits for the personnel. Yeah, 90% plus, and sometimes higher, 95, 93% of the budget is wages and benefits. That leaves like about 5% or less of expendable flexibility to buy new apparatus, to rebuild stations, to buy new equipment. So if it wasn't budgeted for in the last year and it's not in the current budget, you're probably gonna have to wait to the next budget cycle. I mean, that's the first question I ask when people come into the office and say, hey, chief, can we buy this? Well, let's take a look at the budget. The budget that I submitted like 6 months ago and was approved, that is good for another, whatever, 9 months or 10 months. This is the budget. I don't see ventilation prop in here, and I don't see any way that I can get a ventilation prop based on this is what was approved. We'll just do it anyway. It doesn't work that way. Your household budget doesn't work that way. Well, if we truly do need it, then I got to put it in next year's budget request, which is going to put it off. And that's why budgets are so critical, to make sure you actually plan for these things. You may not see all the landmines, but again, if I was going in as the new training chief, or the next operations chief, or fire prevention chief, or whatever chief in charge of a budget, I'd be doing, as I mentioned, a SWOT analysis or a SWOC analysis, both. I'd be going into that new let's say you're battalion chief and now getting promoted to the deputy chief of operations in charge of everything. Well, you better be doing a full strength analysis, weakness analysis, opportunity analysis, threats and challenges, and see that you're projecting these things. How would you like it if the person that budgets for your fire stations or budgets for your apparatus, oh, I didn't realize the rig was 25 years old. Well, shit, we didn't budget $1.5 million for a new ladder company. That's gonna have to be next year's budget. Well, that should have already been on your radar screen of replacing apparatus or rebuilding stations. Now, a lot of times it's not uncommon to have something approved in this year's budget for, hey, a $1.5 million truck company, yeah, that's the cost, or a $700,000, $800,000 new fire engine, yeah, that's the cost. It's one thing that it may be approved, but when it comes time to spend the money, well, it was approved 3 months ago, right? And then COVID hit, businesses shut down, so all those revenues are not coming in like we thought were coming in because of businesses shut down, no sales tax. So you know what? That truck or new engine may get deferred to the next budget cycle. Can kick down the road, but again, if the money's not there, the money's not there. So don't just think, well, it's written down, it was approved. Things can change, and they should change, because the budget's there for a reason, because, well, there's reserves. Yeah, reserves are there for rainy days. Well, we're in a rainy day time right now because of the pandemic, right? But the rainy day fund is not meant to get us into the next 20 years. It's there for those worst case scenarios, like when that fire engine crashes, that 5-year-old fire engine crashes, that wasn't going to get replaced anyway for another 10 years. So you didn't budget the $700,000-$800,000, but now you just crashed that rig, it's totaled. Well, we'll just buy a new one. Insurance will cover it. Well, it all depends on what your structure is. But anyway, the finance stuff is unsexy, but you know what? We need to do a better job of having people of all ranks, not just the chiefs, but all ranks, understand at least the budget. If nothing else, have a working knowledge of it, realize we don't just go back to the money tree and grab money off there and replace things. It doesn't work that way. I'm not trying to be mean, just reality. So as always, thank you very much for the gift of your time. Until the next episode, be safe, keep fighting the good fight, and we'll see you soon. Have a great day, everyone.